Hey there, welcome to today's episode of Coffee and Conversations. I'm your host, Mr. Atri. I'm a consulting psychologist here at Speak It Out Clinic, Kolkata, and today I have a very special guest with us, Ms. Deboshila Bose. Ms. Deboshila Bose works at Fortis Hospital, Kolkata, and has been working actively for quite some time right now. Today's topic is a very important and a very hot topic, like how we are going to put it across. It is on understanding couple dynamics, couple relationships, and overall the general sense of love in today's generation, right? So to start with, I welcome you, Ms. Deboshila.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving your time and doing this interview.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Right. So I think let's cut to the chase. How do you think dating has changed in the last decade? Are we more confused now, or is it the same, or how do you notice changes?
Yes, so basically human beings always want love and they have always tried to find love. But what has changed in the last decade, or with the newer generations, with the late millennials, with the Gen Zs, what I feel is that people now consciously search for love, right? And that has led to the boom of the dating apps that we see. Initially, people would fall in love, right? They would meet someone in their workplace or in their college or in their tuition, right? Would start off as friends or as a normal conversation, and then that connection would build up into something more later. But now with the dating apps, with social media, so people consciously search for a partner. They are connecting with the mindset that they will be dating somebody, right? Now, to understand where this shift came from, so we as a generation, if we compare ourselves with the previous generations, people would have joint families, right? Would be growing up with siblings, with cousins, with a good support system. I would not say that joint families did not have their own challenges, or having siblings or multiple children in the house did not have its own challenges. It did have, but still there was some sense of social support within the family. People would have much better connect with their neighbors. So that lack of social support, so nowadays with the current generation, which I hear very frequently, is that loneliness is one of the issues, right? And I feel that loneliness, the world becoming more virtually connected and slowly moving away from giving time to relationships, having those one-on-one conversations, sharing deep thoughts, that I would not say desperate, but that need for a partner, need for somebody to connect with is felt a lot more evidently. Yeah. Right? And that has somehow led to this change where people now consciously search for a partner. Also, in the earlier times, dating was a lot of challenge. Obviously, families would not accept, you would need to hide, right? You would need to put in a lot of effort to make out some time to meet the person or have a conversation with the person. And since that challenge is not there anymore, so we are more easygoing, and we are, we do not think a lot before we try to connect with somebody, because earlier the thoughts would be like, what will my family say, right? If somebody gets to know in my home, then what will be the reaction? So people would step back a lot of time, right? But now that thing is not there anymore. So given all of these factors, I think the pattern of dating has changed. Also, I feel that sometimes I see this in teenagers, that they feel this pressure. If everybody in their friend group has a partner and they do not have it, right, that seems like a kind of deviation, or they are being the odd one out, right? So sometimes the search for a partner could just be motivated by that also, right, which somebody may not consciously realize, but that is definitely a factor that is at play. So I think these are some of the things which have really changed over the past decade.
Right. I think I would agree with all of them to start with. Um, with the dating apps thing specifically that caught my ears, do you think it's also it has become a problem that we have a lot of options around us right now? And like you said, that how dating has become so accessible, it has become like socially sanctioned by families and other, let's say, systems in our society, right?
Absolutely.
So do you, yeah.
Yeah, so yes, definitely having more options, that is one of the things. It can be a blessing and it can be a problem also, right? A curse and a blessing in disguise, both, if we say that. So when you have more options, yes, obviously you can figure out which is the right one for you. But at the same time, when you have more options, it can confuse you, right? So with this system of having so many options, what has become a problem that I see is people have forgotten something, that whoever you choose to be with in this entire world, right, just not as a partner, as a friend, as a whoever, whatever be the kind of relationship, you will not like everything about that person, right? That cannot be possible. So there will be some points of differences. Now, earlier when people would get into a relationship, because they would first get into it after a lot of thought, because it was not that accessible, it was not that easy. So unless and until people were really very serious about it, they would not jump into a relationship very easily. And once they would get into it, people did not have this mindset that there can be another option apart from making it a long term. So there would be a lot more effort and sincerity that we would see. It's not, again, I would say that could be a curse also in certain ways, that even when two people would have very major differences in their core values, in their set of beliefs, but still they would continue in what we can say not a very healthy relationship, because the mindset of walking out of a relationship was not something that was there. But since now we do not look at this thing that way, when the relationship becomes toxic, or when we figure out that two people have such major differences that having a smooth journey forward is not possible anyway, then we can definitely take the decision to even sometimes mutually and peacefully part ways, not with bitterness. But at the same time, taking that decision, I think, is becoming a lot too quicker. People are not trying hard enough, or putting in that effort, or putting things to the test of time, to figure out whether this can actually work out or not, right? So little differences, I would not say trivial, but at least few differences, few areas of conflict are often leading people to take this decision that this is not working out, right? While forgetting that there will be certain things which will not work out between two people, right? You would need to sit down, have a discussion, see how you can negotiate, right? And sometimes live with some differences, because there will always be some differences between two people. There cannot be all similarities. So this is, I think, one of the disadvantages that has happened in this system of having too many options, because whenever you're feeling frustrated or you're not feeling well in a certain aspect with regards to your relationship, because you have other options, you just want to move ahead without reflecting that whether this was tried enough or not, and not continuing it when you are very sure, no, this is something, this difference is something that is too significant that it does not make sense to try and continue.
Right, I think it makes a lot sense when we look at it this way and acknowledge its the disadvantages and the advantages of it, right? We again, we talk about something called the perpetual conflicts in couple therapy, where there's one conflict that a couple has which is for a prolonged period of time, right? So, like you said, that efforts and sincerity and sometimes this mutual negotiation. Do you also somewhere feel that our attachment styles have a role to play in it, or how do our attachment styles sort of mediate this whole process in the relationship?
Absolutely. So attachment styles, to give a very brief about it, there are 4 kinds one is secure attachment, and the other three comes under insecure attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. So in secure attachment, obviously people can understand what it is, but insecure attachment, where you want somebody but at the same time you're not able to trust fully, so you have a fear of abandonment, you tend to cling a lot because you fear that the person might leave you. Avoidant attachment, where you again tend to dismiss or avoid because you're scared of the attachment. Disorganized is a mix of all of these. So why did so many people in a certain generation grow up to have not one of the three not desirable attachment styles? That is something that we need to really look into. So as I said, there was one generation, if we say the millennials, where a lot of transitions happened, right? People started living in nuclear families, started having one child. So if we just look at it this way, when we, again as I said, when we have had joint families, when we have had many people in the house, it was not that friction or conflict was not there. But a child would grow up watching friction also, and a child would grow up watching a healthy connect also, right? So both were there. Now in a nuclear family, if somehow parents do not go along really well, and the transition that started happening with women started working, the roles, the gender roles shifting, and people having a difficulty in adjusting to that, where we started expecting men to contribute in the household work. That would lead to conflict sometimes, where women, if they were placing more importance on their career, initially obviously in the transition phase people had a difficulty in accepting it, and women were expected to give more time at home and all of that. So this transition phase led to a lot of friction and conflicts between the couples. So an entire generation kind of grew up watching that. So unfortunately, the generation that grew up watching not very healthy relationships, very frictional relationships, did not develop very healthy attachment styles, right? And as I said, with nuclear families, the only example that you have is your parents, right? It's not that you're watching your uncle and aunts also. You're seeing other people with other healthy attachment styles also. That was not happening. So with all of that, when you do not have a very healthy attachment style, again with if you're a single child, if your both parents are working, if you miss them, so see, where do these differences lie? When initially women started working, we had like 10 women out of 100 who were working, right? So the children of those 10 women would feel that everybody's mother prepares a tiffin for them, my mother is not doing that, right? Or everybody's mother is coming to drop them to school, my mom is not doing that. But now that ratio has changed. You will see 90 women working and 10 women not working. So given that fact, a child who has a working parent will no longer feel different, no longer feel any kind of no longer feel that they are the odd one out. So these things do not happen anymore. But for that generation that grew up within this transition period, they had these things in mind, right? Yeah. That also led to some difficulty in their attachment patterns, because then you would have some, I would not say hostility, but some, what would I say? Difficult feelings, or not very pleasant emotions towards your parents. That bit of why is it that my mom does not, or my parents do not cater to me like others. And when you grow up with these feelings which have not been addressed, which have not been spoken to, and when you see the world around, so all of that does lead to unhealthy attachment styles. Also, I feel that now if we just look at the very present times, people are more mindful of their decisions when it comes to taking children, right? Yeah. People are more mindful of whether they just not the financial resources, whether they have the other resources also, whether they will be able to bring up a child in a healthy manner or not. That is something that we are now considering. But till the longest time, when you get married, having a child was the obvious thing to do. It was like a social milestone, and if you do not reach that milestone, it was again, kind of a failure. People would feel that they are the odd one out if they do not have a child, right? So it is not that everybody wishes to have a child, but as I said, for the longest time, you could not respect this, perspective of yours if you do not want to go for a child, because the social norms were such that you could not think of it, right? Even if you do not actually want to have a child, or if you feel that you are not capable of, or I would not say capable, but you do not have the right resources and you are not in the right capacity to bring up a child properly, but you would have to still go for it anyway, which has changed now. Right, so all of these factors that happened in between kind of led to unhealthy attachment styles that we see now, and that is obviously going to reflect in your relationships in the present, right? When you grow up as adults, if you have felt neglect as a child, you will fear that in your relationship when you grow up. If you have felt that your needs have not been responded to when you were a child, you will have a fear of abandonment, right? Or you might be somebody who just wants to avoid very close relationships or commitments because you have a fear that you might meet with a heartbreak, because that is again associated to your experiences in childhood and you do not want a repetition of the same. Absolutely. So these things have impacted our attachment styles, and that do come in the way we deal with relationships in the present.
Right. I think that's a wonderful way to put it across, because I think one, we looked at it from a chronological perspective, how the transition happened with
Absolutely.
time, and also taking in place as to the early 2000s major milestones, capitalism, globalization, that
Absolutely.
changed so many familial structures that we see around ourselves right now, right? So again, the whole idea of patriarchy and so many different things just evolved very
Absolutely.
rapidly, right? And it's so important for us to acknowledge that has an impact on our attachment as well. So it's like an overall macro system having an impact on our intrapsychic system, right?
Absolutely.
That's great, in fact, to hear. I was also curious, so you work at a clinical setup, right? So have you seen clients with such attachment styles, or let's say what do you usually do when you see, and how do you think it sort of affects their symptoms, or does it impact their diagnosis in any way?
Unfortunately, when I work with a lot of adolescents, right, late adolescents, young adults, and unfortunately, in most of them, I have not seen a secure attachment. It has, I feel really, heartbroken to kind of say this, that so many of a particular generation or so many of a particular age group does not have a secure attachment, and the reason is they have not grown up watching a very healthy relationship. And but the good thing is that the generation now is a lot more aware about mental health, right? They are a lot more mindful about it, so they are a lot more open to seek help, right? They are a lot more open to accept that there could be certain underlying issues within them which is making their life in the current times difficult in some way, or having an impact on their relationships or in the way they are going about life, which was not there initially. So that's definitely a very positive development. So just like the flip side is that a majority of people within a particular age group have a difficult attachment style, but the good thing is that they are willing to work on it. They are willing to take help for it. So yeah, I see a lot in my clinic, in my practice, in a hospital. When people come to me, I work a lot with adolescents, and and because they are a lot more aware about mental health, they can actually understand and figure out and realize a lot more quicker about where their problems lie when you provide them help, right? And they actually, since you are also a psychologist, you would know this, that therapy is 40% the therapist's effort and 60% the client's, right? So the client really has to work on it. And fortunately, these people do not come with the expectation that the therapist is going to solve all their problems. They know that the therapist is going to help them so that they can solve it on their own. And when they are working on it, so that is why whatever is being discussed in the sessions, whatever are the takeaways from the sessions, they do really implement it in their life, and definitely that shows a lot of progress. Just like I have had people whom I have seen struggling with the relationships a lot in their dating life or otherwise. Similarly, I have seen them, when they work on it, they really make very positive changes in it as well.
Absolutely. I think that's so important, the important point that you got forward, right? That they are willing to work on it. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so always, clinical language, we talk about early identification, and they do that. They identify and they have that awareness and acknowledge that. I think that's a plus that we have as a generation. But again,
there's a lot of other positives also with this generation.
Yes, that's like one of the pluses that we are talking about. But other than that, I also feel that somewhere what I have seen, if I had to share from my experience in my practice, is that a lot of these attachment styles have not only impact in their romantic relationships, but also in the non-romantic relationships, friendships as well, right? So, and also the relationship with family as well. So I think attachment is a huge, broad area that we just touched upon, and I think attachment, when we look at it from a practical lens instead of a theoretical lens, it has so many detailed nuances which we often miss out, and it's not the same for everyone. So
yes, and it is not that people have just one attachment style. Mostly people have a mix of a number of 2 or 3.
That's also a research that I was reading, is that most of the people nowadays are getting classified with disorganized attachment, because it's so mixed. With some people they are avoidant, with some people they are anxious, right?
Absolutely.
So how do we classify? But thank you so much for sharing that insight on attachment. I would want to move forward to the next segment of our interview, where I would want to ask a little bit about what do you think about the red flags and the green flags of our generation right now.
Okay, no, so the red and the green flags are always there. It's just that we did not have a separate terminology for it.
We are able to label it right now.
Yeah, that's the change that has happened. So, see, when we talk about green flags and red flags, what we first need to understand, if somebody in their experience have been exposed to red flags or toxicity or unhealthy patterns, that is something that becomes familiar to them, right? So when they get exposed to something different, they do not know how to respond to it, right? So we see a lot of times that people end up choosing the same kind of partner again and again. That has not worked out for them, right? Because that is the pattern which is familiar to them and they know how to respond to it, right? Even though that response and counter response, if I say, is not desirable, it is frictional, it has a lot of tension, but still that's the only thing that's familiar, right? They do not know otherwise, and when they actually get exposed to the green flags, they do not know how to respond to it. So, if we talk about the red flags and green flags, when we say red flag in a relationship, particularly because we are discussing relationships today, this is, I think, one of the biggest red flags is that if you preoccupy yourself with only one relationship, that's one, and if you do not have a life beyond that. I do not mean to say that having a life beyond just your relationship has to be having a very huge social circle. There are people who are introverts who are very happy to be by themselves, right? When they are not with their partner, they are good to spend time on their own, have activities to do on their own, right? But they have that aspect of themselves. That is very important. When all your energy and attention is invested on just one aspect or one relationship, it can become suffocating. You may feel that there is lack of space, and then a lot of unnecessary things, a lot of trivial things which do not require importance are also given importance, and things become complicated. So that is one of the red flags, I feel. Secondly, other red flag that I feel is, like, this is not red flag in popular terms like how we know, but this is actually a huge problem, that we do not know ourselves very well. Self-awareness is lacking. So why sometimes we complicate things in relationships is because since we do not know ourselves really well, we do not know what to expect from the other end. If your expectations are driven by what other couples do in their relationships, right? So let's say it may happen that, I have seen my friends where their partners give them a lot of surprises, and I feel that my partner should also do the same. And when I do not see that in my partner, that disappoints me, right? And that becomes a point of conflict between both of us. But have I really looked within me to find out that our surprise is really something that I need, or that excites me? Or I could be a person who does not need surprises, or who is not excited by surprises, but who feels more safe, or who feels more cared for when their partner stands by them during times of crisis or trouble. I need that sensitivity, that somebody resonates with my pain. So that could be me and not what I see in others. So for that, I need to introspect and know myself really well. That also involves knowing what are my negotiables and non-negotiables, which means what are those things that I'm okay to adjust and accommodate with, and what are those things which are absolutely non-negotiable, not acceptable for me. When I have that clarity in mind, I can start the relationship on a better note, right? I can communicate this to whoever I'm connecting with from the beginning, that this is something that I cannot deal with, or this is something that is unacceptable to me. Another red flag that I would like to talk about is, and this red flag has always existed. We all want to be our best selves initially when we start a relationship, right? And when we do that, we go out of our way initially to put in effort, to impress or to make the other person feel happy, without reflecting that the version of me that I am showing to the other person right now, is it a version that I will be able to sustain in the long run or not?
Absolutely.
And if that does not happen, what happens is that I have, initiated wrong expectations, right? And when I cannot sustain that later, the other person feels this person is changed, and that happens for both the partners, really. So it's very important. So a good green flag, I would say, is that when you know yourself very well, you know your vulnerabilities as well, you know your limitations, you accept it nicely, and you also make it very clear to the other person when you are connecting, and you be your own self, which you have been throughout and which is what is going to sustain in the long run, and you show that part of you to your partner, so that there is no scope of false expectations. Or if I have to talk about red flags, then another could be, we may want something serious, we may want something casual, we may not believe in commitment, but in kind of trying and testing with different people. That's absolutely fine. But whatever your mindset is, please let the other person know that, right? And if you go ahead with that mindset, both the people has to be on board with it. So that's where the role of consent comes in. If I do not want something serious, something long term, I just want something casual, then it's fine, it's absolutely fine, but I need to let the other person know when initially a connection is building up, or we are conversing, that this is how I look at it, this is what is in my mind, and just ensure that the other person gives consent to it or is on board with it. If both people have different perspectives, or let's say different ways of looking at a relationship, or absolutely different needs and expectations of a relationship, it becomes toxic and complicated later, right? So I think these are some of the red flags that when you do not take consent, when you do not clearly tell the other person that I'm not going for something long term. It's very important. And if you see that even though both people have started on the note that they are going to keep it casual, but you can see that the other person is somehow getting emotionally involved, you need to highlight that, discuss about it, and kind of sort it out immediately and not let it grow and go to a point where again it becomes complicated.
I think that's where we need to learn boundary setting as well, right? And,
Absolutely.
And to draw the boundary where, more importantly, I think what you just spoke about also made me think about how when someone falls in love, romantic love, it also fuses and becomes a part of the identity, right? So the dependence and the independence, it's difficult to achieve balance, I would say, but it's possible. It's not.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible.
It's definitely possible. It is. It can become difficult. So I also feel that having dependency is not the problem. Being dependent, but again, at the cost of losing independence and our own identity, that can be problematic.
Absolutely.
Right. I would want to ask one last question before we close today. A bit on the uphill positive side. So, going through breakups. I mean, this generation, I think, is experiencing. This is, I think, another implicit pandemic that we are experiencing. Breakups and dealing with loss and grief and separation with a loved one. Right? How do you have any tips, or do you have any opinions on the current situation related to breakups? Would you suggest something for the young generation or the generation that they could do something when they are dealing with breakups?
Before giving tips on how can you deal with breakups in a better way, first I would like to say something that as a generation, who are young, who are enthusiastic, we need to be more responsible, when we deal with emotions, when we deal with human beings, right? So one of the things which has made dealing with breakup a lot more difficult nowadays is that people often, discontinue without proper closure. So for all of us who are, listening to us today or seeing this, it's absolutely fine when you do not want to continue with a relationship, right? Sticking on to something unhappily is worse than, parting ways and starting fresh. I genuinely feel that. But when you do not want to stick on to something, and it is for all of us to understand, for the person on the other end also to understand, that why somebody is not feeling comfort or happy in a relationship anymore, what has went wrong, what could be changed. These are questions to which sometimes the person himself or herself may not have the answer to.
Absolutely.
Right? So we need to understand that. But what is important is that it is not working out, right? Or it is no longer feeling peaceful and fine and fresh and healthy. But it is important that we do it with a proper closure, right? Even if you yourself do not know exactly that what has gone wrong, why is it the way it is, communicate that, right? Yes, there will be questions from the other end, right? There will be that phase of difficulty in making the other person understand also. But I would say take that pain, because when things do not end with proper closure, it can lead to problems for both the partners, right? So somebody who has been told that their partner does not want to does not want to continue with them, and without being told the reason for it, or without being told why, just being suddenly left in void, that person finds it difficult to accept it. There is a phase of denial that leads sometimes to a lot of chasing, to a lot of pleading, where again that point of losing your own self, compromising on your self-respect, all of that we talk about. But initially when somebody goes through it, none of these clicks in their mind, right?
Yeah.
Because the brain is desperate to get that closure.
Absolutely.
Right? So that person is also suffering, and with all that chasing, all that continuous pleading and everything, it is making things difficult for the other person also. So trying to end it with a discussion with a sensible, mature discussion is something that we should look at, definitely. Now, when it comes to dealing with breakups, I would say that whether you get a closure or not, like if you have not got a closure, this is from the other end of the spectrum, I would speak from the other person's perspective. If you do not get a closure, if you do not get a proper closure, if you do not have a proper answer of what led to the discontinuation of the relationship, it is fine. Obviously, would not feel fine, but we need to build acceptance to that. What is important is to acknowledge that the reality is either one or both people in a relationship do not want to continue it anymore. Why I said either both or one, even if one person does not want to continue, it actually makes no sense to continue it, right? Because when you get into a relationship, you got into it because you connected with somebody, right? You felt that connection, but if that connection is lost, even if not from your side, even if from the other side, we need to remember it is a dyadic equation, right? It's between two people. So even if one person is not on board, there is no other way. You cannot force someone to feel that connection. That is very important that we need to know, right? You cannot force, you cannot do anything different or better if that connection is lost from one end, right? You cannot really make somebody want to be in a relationship when they don't want to be. So these are things that we need to accept. One, that when this acceptance comes in, it becomes easier. Secondly, a heartbreak is not going to feel nice and is not going to go away overnight, right? Again, we have become low on patience, low on frustration tolerance. We have moved away from the habit of delayed gratification and being able to tolerate that. Distress tolerance has become poor, and this is not just for a particular generation. With the advent of social media, everything becoming so accessible, so in general, people from all age groups, their attention, their concentration, their patience level, frustration tolerance, everything has gone down. Now, with that happening, what happens is that when you have a heartbreak or any other difficult emotional experience, you want that feeling or that experience to get over very quickly, right? But that cannot happen. If you have been attached to somebody, if you have had a connection, if you have spent a lot of good times with somebody, right, those memories will stay evident in your mind for a time. So it's very important to acknowledge and accept that a heartbreak is going to make you feel low. It is going to give you a difficult emotional experience for a while before you can finally move on. When you become restless to overcome it in a very short span of time, that is when it becomes even more difficult to deal with it. That is when it becomes even more difficult to move on from it. We cannot run away from our own emotions. We cannot run away from our own pain. So the only way that you finally move on and come out of it is when you let those emotions flow within you. You experience it, you accept it, and a point will come, when you will be able to look forward. Take help of your support systems if required. Go and take help of a professional, right? If your brain is asking for a lot of answers, asking you a lot of questions, why did this happen, what went wrong, did I do this wrong, could I have done this differently, right? Just keep telling yourself that the reality is that this is not there anymore, and I will try to learn from it. I will try to understand what else can be done or what could be done differently from my end, and I'll keep that in mind whenever I think of getting into something in the future. But it is okay, to feel devastated for a while, to feel low, to feel frustrated is fine. These are not pleasant to experience, but these emotions exist because human beings experience it, right? So we cannot expect ourselves to be in a state of mind all the time where we do not get to experience this, right? So we have to experience these emotions, and I would always say that certain things that you should do so that things do not become worse. When you have a breakup or something, make sure that you talk about it to your support system, but to your trusted ones, right? Do not talk about it to anybody and everybody. Be respectful of the time that you guys spend together, right? Even if you realize that you have completely chosen a wrong person, do not reprimand yourself for that, right? All of us learn through experience, and it's absolutely fine when we make mistakes. What is not fine is when we do not accept and acknowledge and learn from that mistake. I think that's more important.
I think this was such a beautiful, comprehensive way to understand breakup specifically in our generation, right? I mean, we talk about acceptance, though it's also so important to acknowledge that it does not come easy, right? And
Absolutely.
it is, I don't think it's supposed to come easy. Breakups are
right.
difficult, heartbreaks
Right.
are difficult.
Right.
So they ideally should not be easy for us to deal with. So if any one of you or your loved one is going through any form of heartbreak or breakup, it would be nice if you could just remind them that this is not supposed to be easy, but we are there for you, right? I think that can
Right.
do the job. And there are a lot of internal dialogues that keep happening.
Absolutely.
A lot of whys, a lot of where did I go wrong, somewhat internalizing, somewhat externalizing, both.
Right.
That both happens together. But I think that's where it's also very important for us to be patient with ourselves and also empathize with ourselves.
Right. Absolutely.
Developing a more intrapersonal relationship where we are focusing on ourselves and building the relationship back on ourselves. It's almost like coming back home to yourself.
Right. Accept your emotions.
Yeah,
And that's
precisely.
really important.
Right. Well, I think we have come to an end of the interview. I think this was just brilliant for me to at least host you.
Thank you so much.
We have talked about something so important which I think is echoing in most of the therapy rooms, not only in India but I think globally, right? I think
Absolutely.
this is a huge hot topic to get in with, right? But also I think one of the things that comes to my mind when I reflect back on the interview right now is that how love is not, maybe it's not a very hopeless situation, it's not broken, but it's more like we have more power and autonomy to direct it how we
Yeah, human beings have not forgotten how to love.
Right.
It does
Precisely.
exist in all of us.
Right, and thank you so much, Deboshila, for doing this with us today.
Thank you.
Any closing reflections and thoughts before we end?
Yeah, so everybody who is listening to us right now, please, do not judge yourselves by the number of relationships or breakups you have had. Do not judge yourself by the mistakes you have made. I think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that just like, the moon also has some scars, so all of us do have our vulnerabilities and limitations, and it is normal to have it. So be fine with your vulnerabilities, and unless and until you accept it and be okay with it, you will not be able to work on it. So only when we accept ourselves the way we are, we can actually work on our limitations or vulnerabilities, and you do not have to work on all of that and make all of that perfect, but that basically knowing it, working on it, accepting it while also accepting it and being okay that okay, I cannot do this probably, that's absolutely fine. I will just try to see how much I can make it better so that I become the best version of myself.
Absolutely, and I think that's precisely sums up the entire thing that we talked about. Thank you again, Deboshila. So this is me, Atri, your host, signing off for today's episode on Coffee and Conversations. And next episode, we'll again have a wonderful guest with us, another host. We'll be talking about again something very important in this generation. So stay tuned, and I hope I get to see you all soon. Goodbye.